Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the Circa Expert Talk for the month of October 2021. As always, we try to bring to you national and international experts who share perspectives on clean air management with you. And this time too, we are pleased to invite Professor Mayank Kumar of Mechanical Engineering Department, who's a young faculty from IIT Delhi, who will share his work with you on real-time source apportionment of ambient PM 2.5 at IIT Delhi Supersite. A warm welcome, Professor Mayank, to the Circa Expert Talk. I now would like to invite Mr. Arun Dugal, who's the founder of Circa, for opening remarks and to share a few ideas with us. Over to Mr. Dugal.
Thank you, Hemant. I'm delighted to add my personal and warm welcome to all attendees on this expert series talk. Circa, as most of you know, is a Center for Clean Air at IIT Delhi. And it was formed about 2.5 years ago, and in my view has done great work in getting the academic talent as well as policymakers together to make difference in the area of air quality in Delhi NCR in all of India. We have this year expanded the scope of Circa to include climate change. Climate change, as you know, is a burning issue on which this week deliberations will start in Ireland for the way forward. In my view, climate change and clean air or air pollutions are linked. They are the short-term and long-term effect of the same phenomena. For example, emissions from power plant. And therefore, I think working on these issues together will generate maximum co-benefit in terms of improving the quality of air and reducing greenhouse emissions, I'm sorry. So with that, I would also welcome Professor Mayank Kumar, who I've known for a number of years, to this series of talks, and I'll request Professor Sagnik Dey to make the introductions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dugal. So it's a great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Mayank Kumar. Mayank Kumar received the undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering from IIT Kanpur in 2004, and then a PhD degree, MS and PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, US, in coal gasification. He also worked with Chevron Corporation in oil and gas industry, Houston, Texas, and data science industry in Gurgaon, before joining IIT Delhi as an assistant professor in 2016. His research interests include air pollution, pressurized coal gasification and plasma waste gasification, clean combustion technologies, and real-time characterization and source apportionment. In fact, he has been working on a real-time source apportionment in Delhi, and he has set up actually a super site at our IIT campus, which is now the new technique, one can say, to really track the efficacy of the policy in terms of how the source contributions to air pollution has been changing. So I'm sure he will touch upon many of these exciting results today. So with this short introduction, I invite Professor Mayank to deliver his lecture today.
Thanks for the introduction, Sagnik, and thanks to Mr. Dugal and for giving this opportunity to me to present this work in front of this great audience. And the topic is really built upon what started as the Grand Challenge Project, an initiative within from IIT Delhi itself.
Mayank, sorry to interrupt. Is it possible for you to put it full screen mode?
Yeah, sure. So Now it's full screen, right?
Yeah, perfect. Please go ahead.
Thanks. So this initiative, this research actually started as what's called the Grand Challenge project uh, at IIT Delhi, and this is an interdisciplinary project looking at different aspects of air pollution, the challenge of air pollution, and what I'll be presenting today. Specifically, what I'm presenting today, it involves. I'm actually presenting on behalf of the Grand Project team, and this particular work involves involvement of a lot of other people, Professor Vikram from chemical engineering, a lot of, most importantly, a lot of research scholars and postdocs who have worked to come to speed really with these new technologies with which they had, in fact, we had little experience, but then working on them at pace and hitting the ground running so that we could get results which would be of interest to the scientific community and to this area in which we reside, the Delhi NCR region. So what I'll be discussing is insights from our almost now 2 years of operation of these highly sophisticated instruments. Although I won't cover all of this time because a lot of the later data we are actually in the process of really running and analyzing and absorbing ourselves. But still, I think we'll have some insights, some interesting snippets for you as we move ahead. So we'll be basically be discussing insights from continuous highly time resolved PM 2.5 speciation, and that is what will lead to source apportionment. So I'll touch upon the instruments that we are running, how they are giving us the continuous speciation or real-time speciation of PM 2.5 and real-time source apportionment. Then I'll move to a few case studies, probably the few most interesting ones. Although we have other results uh, based on this work, and actually, I'll also, before I move ahead, I'll also like to acknowledge some of our collaborators. So some of this work is done in collaboration with IIT Kanpur, and we are doing more work in collaboration with other labs across the country, such as PRL and others, Physical Research Laboratory. So the three case studies that I'll take is the first one is Diwali fireworks and stubble burning. So what does our data tell about those two particular high impact events? Then something special happened over the operation of these set of equipment over the last couple of years. That's the COVID-19 lockdown. So obviously we like to see what these equipment tell us over about what happened as a result of this lockdown on PM 2.5 and the pollution scene in general. And then last but not the least, a very specific problem that is specific to this Delhi NCR region, the Indo-Gangetic Plain, is the contribution of a large amount of chloride to our PM 2.5. So these are the three case studies. So first, let's talk about what we have that gives us access to the high quality data, which can make us draw these conclusions. So what we can do here is actually complete speciation of PM 2.5. That means we can find out what are the almost the complete set of constituents of PM 2.5. Now, how we can do that is by a combination of a set of equipment. One is a mass spectrometer, basically that runs on continuously on aerosols, the non-refractory part of the aerosols, and it gives us organic matter. Let me switch on the pointer. It gives us organic matter and a lot of ions, especially the secondary ions like sulfate, nitrate, chloride, and ammonium. Then this is definitely a key component of PM 2.5 mass, but then we also have trace metals, which at different times of the year can have a small to large contribution, but they are very important because they are signatures or they are pointers towards the sources, because these trace metals can point to the source where the particular emission is coming from. And then we also have black carbon, the sooty, the dark, the black component of PM 2.5 that is measured using another equipment. So actually, this is not all the set of equipment that we have purchased. There are several others, but for the purposes of today's talk, I think we can focus on the data retrieved from these instruments. So combined with these two instruments, of course, the setup of the lab keeps changing as the students come up with their own ideas. And there is some part of the lab on the other side of this space. So there's some other equipment that's lying there. But this is basically our space where we gather and analyze the data. So I won't really be getting into the math of how we kind of use data from the collected from these set of instrument and how do we do the source apportionment. That kind of getting into the math and might be a spoiler, especially since we have limited time today. But for those who are interested, it's a deconvolution technique that's applied to the speciation data. It's kind of like uh, eigen decomposition. In fact, one key aspect of doing source apportionment based on the complete chemical speciation data that we obtain from these equipment uh, is one key method is in fact principal component analysis or PCA, which is nothing but eigen decomposition of the underlying covariance matrix of the various species measurements. So but what we are doing here is applying a next iteration of the PCA technique called as PMF or multilinear engine. So I won't go into the maths of it, but I'll just say that it's a statistical, multivariate statistical method that once you have the speciation data, complete PM2.5 speciation from this equipment, you can apply that technique on which software exists in the open source. So it's something that anyone can do. And based on that, get a handle or get an account of the sources. So first we did this speciation and source apportionment on two specific events, the Diwali fireworks and stubble burning. So let's get straight to what the data gives us. So although now we have looked at one more Diwali after 2019 and there's another one coming around the corner. So we have more and more data for validation of our insights. But in short, what do we observe around the time that Diwali starts happening? The first thing we see is that certain key elements which are constituents of fireworks, bismuth, strontium, aluminium, barium, these elements, their concentrations jump multiple fold. Okay? And that high concentration remains for the night of Diwali. Okay? How long does it fade away? We'll see very soon. But for some reason, there's also interest in not just these elemental contributions of PM2.5, but also the organics. What we see is that the organics increase. So PD is what I'm calling pre-Diwali, DD is during Diwali, FD is following Diwali. So from pre-Diwali to during Diwali, there is a certain increase. They're not nearly as much increase like 140x, 320x in the elements, but certain increase in the organics, the organic component of PM2.5, obviously because the character crackers do have organics. While you would expect this to subside once Diwali gets over, but you see that it keeps on increasing in the the following Diwali after the Diwali is over. So there's something about that. In fact, there's no secret to it. It's something to do with stubble or biomass burning and not to do with Diwali, because Diwali in 2019 was the end of October, 28th October, and the stubble burning also starts in this season. So this is just giving you a pointer as to just seeing the trend of the overall to PM2.5 might be misleading, and it's important to deconvolute or decouple the data to see the different contributors to the increase. Okay. Now during Diwali, we see that before Diwali, this red color is actually the contribution of elements. Okay. So during Diwali, there is a spectacular contribution of elements to the total PM2.5. These specific elements, whereas before Diwali and after Diwali, not so much. It kind of starts going down. And this red is actually the elements are a key composition of this, but this red is actually the fireworks source. So this red is the composition of the fireworks itself to the PM2.5 that you're seeing during Diwali. So 94% of the PM2.5 that you see during Diwali is actually just the fireworks. And we were able to get this number by applying the set of multivariate statistical methods. Again, the peak in composition lasts around the night of Diwali and the early morning in the next day. So it's a very localized, very very sharp, very focused burst of pollutants that's released into the air, but it seemingly kind of clears off very soon as well. How soon? So this soon. Okay. So you see, this is just the impact of the fireworks source. When we say source apportionment, we have like deconvoluted or separated the impact of different sources. And if you just look at the fireworks source itself, how much is it contributing to the Delhi PM2.5? It is, just during this season. So this is the night of Diwali. Okay? So this is where it peaks, and then there is some, you always have some leftover fireworks. You don't want to spend everything on the night of the Diwali, you want to keep some, especially if you remember the time when we used to be really fond of bursting these crackers. So there's some bursting of crackers in the days following Diwali, some on the previous night as well. But this is where this is all that is there to the impact of the fireworks. So I think this is an important graphic because okay, there's a lot of different tones to the discussion around Diwali and specifically political overtones. But this, just speaking about the analytical or the research aspect of this, we see that our research shows, our work shows that what probably a lot of people already suspect is that there is a great impact of fireworks on Delhi's air quality, but it is just for that night of Diwali, or give or take a couple of days. So the other factor that always comes around with Diwali and troubles us, especially people living in Delhi and into Gangetic Plain, is that piggybacking on the Diwali festival, we also have this stubble burning. I'm using the generic term of biomass burning, and here we have again segregated the biomass burning source based on our elemental measurements. And the before Diwali, the pre-Diwali, extended pre-Diwali region is this. This is during Diwali and following Diwali. So this peaks and troughs are because of the fact that there is a diurnal variation within the day, because the biomass burning peaks during the night and kind of is slower during the day, also because of what's known as the boundary layer variation of the boundary layer height. But we see that the biomass burning is definitely at some level. This is the region where we didn't have data. So at some level during Diwali, but it's definitely rising after Diwali. So the impact of biomass, we can argue that this is stubble burning, but I'll desist at this point. So there's definitely an increase after Diwali of biomass burning emissions, whereas we clearly saw that the Diwali impact just died around the day of Diwali itself. So the consistent rise in pollution after Diwali, this is just based on the elemental data, okay, the elements. It's much more likely attributed to biomass burning events than just the Diwali itself. Now, we can now look at the organics, the first instrument I showed you on that slide. So we can just analyze the organics and again deconvolute the organic data into, if you're aware with this terminology, the primary organics and the oxidized or the secondary organics. The primary as well as the oxidized components all show an increasing trend after Diwali. And this is coming from biomass burning, that is happening, biomass combustion or for heating, coal combustion, all kinds of burning of all kinds of biomass that picks up after Diwali, because this is the time in which that pickup happens. So if you want to blame something apart from meteorology, the meteorology is a big villain in some sense, and we'll come to it towards the end of this presentation. But the biomass burning and the organics that are emitted as a result of that are a key component of the ever increasing PM 2.5 that we see towards the end of October and entering into November. So you can stop me, of course, at any point of time if you have any questions, and I'll try to keep track of the time itself. So now there's a key component of PM 2.5 that we call as black carbon, and it makes sense to study that black carbon because it can specifically point towards biomass burning events, and we can actually do source apportionment on just this black carbon itself using separate mathematical techniques. So this is black carbon again, keeps increasing once you enter October and goes into increase during November as well. And if you do the source apportionment, when we do the source apportionment of black carbon, it's not as fine a source apportionment. It does not give you as much detail, but it does get split into FF is fossil fuel burning, BB is biomass burning. So we see that biomass burning is this red. So we see that the reddish contribution to this total black carbon, it keeps increasing in October going into November, and the primary reason is bound to be stubble burning or local biomass burning in Delhi or around Delhi region. Now, if one way to track, now this is what is typically done in published research, is that you track the wind trajectories that are arriving at your location. So this is in the during monsoon or slightly post monsoon or during the monsoon season, we see that the wind trajectories are primarily coming from this area over southwest. But if we go to the post monsoon season, and these red dots are actually the fire data, the number of fires. These of course increase during October, November, for which period these trajectories are. So during this time, the trajectories, the wind trajectories are typically arriving from the northwest. So there is the concomitant pollution arriving from the northwest, the stubble burning emissions that is given by these fires that is affecting us. And we can actually weight these concentrations by the concentrations of black carbon that are arriving, and what we get is concentration weighted trajectories, basically saying how much of black carbon at our receptor location is coming from these upwind sources in the northwest. So again, this is just an overall trend of the black carbon that's emitted in this season, and the contribution of biomass burning, which keeps increasing as we go into October and then November. And finally, we can do a linear regression, find out what's the correlation between the number of fire grounds and the biomass burning source that we have obtained here. And we see that it's a very linear fit. So based on this, you would like to say that there is a definite relationship between the number of fire counts that we see in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, especially in the northwest of Delhi, upwind of Delhi, and the biomass burning component of the black carbon that we are sampling at our location at IIT. So now I'll move to the second case study. I think I'm on time, which is the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown on PM 2.5 in Delhi. So here we're not just going to be looking at PM 2.5. The story here is related actually to some of the gaseous pollutants. What we have definitely seen in the lockdown is, our PM 2.5 definitely decreased to lower values than what we had in the pre-lockdown. END is extended lockdown 1. You can see the dates. This is lockdown phase 2, lockdown phase 3, and phase 4. And again, we can, using our instruments, deconvolute or decouple this total PM 2.5 into an organic fraction and elemental fraction, and do source apportionment or give the different factors which contribute to it. So the organic factors are actually a lot of time not relatable to the layman, and we are going to deal with this as we move 3 or 4 slides into the future. But the factors that we generally get are hydrocarbon like aerosols, biomass burning like aerosols, low volatility oxidized aerosols, semi-volatile oxidized aerosols. So there is a scientific utility to it, and it does get connected to actual sources. But much more interesting might be the elemental, the source apportionment done on the elemental data, which gives us vehicular emissions, biomass burning, a chloride source, which we'll get to it towards the end of this presentation, a zinc, potassium, bromine source, which is most likely waste incineration and dust and power plants. So, and the magnitude of change is given in this matrix. We'll come to more easier plots in a minute. And something very specific that we saw in this lockdown was that we had very little traffic on the road, which resulted in low NOx. But for some reason, we saw high ozone in the lockdown, and this is something which has been seen across the world in this lockdown, and something that has been observed also in the experience of China. As they try to reduce their PM 2.5 pollution, they observed a surprising increase in ozone. This is again visible here from these are the monitoring station data, and ozone is actually a very serious ground level pollutant. In fact, the classic LA smog of the 1970s, the ozone was the primary contributor. So we see that in the lockdown, the total PM 2.5 was decreasing as we saw over there. We saw sharp dip in PM 2.5, much lower levels. This was also the experience of people. And if you look at the vehicles, this is the vehicular source. We see that it goes to a much lower level here. And this blue line is actually the data from Google, the Google mobility trend data that kind of became popular during the lockdown. So we correlated with our vehicular source with the Google mobility trends. Basically, the trends are important. The amount of mobility at different intersections around metro stations or bus stations, popular areas. So I think our vehicular factor given by analysis correlates very well with this this mobility trend. So definitely vehicular traffic went down as we entered the lockdown. something went up actually. So although the total PM 2.5 here definitely went down from the pre-lockdown levels, some constituents, some organic constituents actually went up towards the end. Okay, now these are low volatility organic fractions of the PM 2.5. Why did they increase? So the answer actually lies in the point that if you decrease NOx, too much, your ozone sometimes goes up in low VOC settings, in VOC limited settings, and when your ozone goes up, it oxidizes your aerosols, your semi and high volatility aerosols, and produces low volatility aerosols. So because there is high ozone, there's high oxidation potential in the environment, and some components of PM 2.5 actually started increasing towards the end of the lockdown. Now, this is not to get into too much of a detail here, too much of a technical detail, but it just tells us about the kind of challenges associated with reducing air pollution and the non-linearities that exist when we try to reduce air pollution, especially in a classic event like lockdown. So just something to be aware of as we move forward, that there's going to be ups and downs as we move on this journey, but we have to move down. And this kind of data gives us some indication of what is to come, but of course, that's a challenge that has to be taken. And this is just the biomass burning source correlated with the fire counts, because there's biomass double burning inside in the summer season as well. Now, this is just the profile of the sources. So I said that we can convert the data of this not so user friendly or not this layman friendly organic decomposition, and we can do something that's called as a double PMF, and that gives us sources which are relatable, mostly relatable. Okay, so vehicular emissions, biomass burning, these are just the factor profiles or the source profiles, the signature of sources, how much of sulfur, titanium, vanadium, manganese, and aerosols it is there. So something a little bit more technical that we can come back to if there are questions. So just broadly, once we do this kind of couple everything from our elemental source apportionment and organic source apportionment, we can look at a combined picture. And this is actually something that was done for the first time actually in literature, that we did this, and then in collaboration with IIT Kanpur actually. And then this work is now moving on. We are doing more of this because it's actually very rare that these instruments are there at the same place. Now this is getting more and more popular. We hear of more projects which are funded. Again, thanks again to IIT Delhi for sponsoring this kind of a project where we can, really this kind of disparate instruments together and, get this kind of data. So what we are seeing is vehicular emission comes down sharply. Biomass emission was not much in February, maybe due to some winter heating, and then again it's not much, but starts rising towards the later phase of lockdown because there is stubble burning in the summer harvest season. Secondary chloride, no effect of lockdown. We'll come to it in a bit. And power plant source, power consumption was low, it goes down and then starts increasing. There is some combustion source which has increased. So probably people didn't go out, didn't go to restaurants, so maybe they burnt some kind of biomass at their homes to cook. So there's some combustion source which actually increased. So a lot of interesting data. Probably I'll just skip the rest for now on unless there are questions. And this is again the variation of black carbon during lockdown. Maybe I'll skip that again and move ahead. And again, the variation of black carbon in lockdown also correlated well with the Google Transit, the Google Mobility Stations data. And after the lockdown happened, also the MODIS fire counts, the satellite fire counts correlated well with our biomass burning black carbon source apportionment. So now this is the last part of this presentation, and we have a lot of stories to tell about the source apportionment that we did. But I think as a first as an initial as a presentation made, I made this in a way which is more palatable to the general, to people who may not have air pollution as their background, because I know that air pollution was not my background. I'm a mechanical engineer. So we have more stories to tell, and we'll definitely be interested in discussing more about these results or what else do we have. But let's move to something which is very specific signature of the pollution in Delhi. Okay, and that is the chloride. So people have multiple researchers, including us, over the last 3 years, have observed that there is a insanely high contribution of chloride to Delhi's PM 2.5. And maybe something I just mentioned, something which I just remembered, not on this slide. When we think of the classic smog, the pollution episodes across the world, we think of the London smog of the 1950s. That was typically called as a sulfurous smog because the coal that was burning in the outskirts of London gave you a high sulfate concentration in the particulate matter, and lot of PM 2.5, but a lot of sulfur. So that's called sulfurous smog. That's not something you observe in Delhi. Now, in the LA smog of the 1970s, again, there was a lot of vehicles, so a lot of NOx, a lot of ground level ozone. But ozone is again something that we don't see breaching the air quality standards. We have a PM 2.5 problem, but a big PM 2.5 problem. But in Delhi, what's very specific to Delhi is this prevalence of high amount of chloride. Okay, so we do definitely have a huge chloride source somewhere in Delhi, which is emitting a lot of gas phase chloride, and with the amount of ammonia emissions that are kind of abundant everywhere these days, especially in a place like Delhi related to agriculture, industrial processes, and human sources. So you get a lot of ammonium chloride that goes on to the particle phase, and once you have a lot of ammonium chloride a load of chloride in the particle phase, it increases the water absorbing capacity of the aerosols. So you have more and more water now. This is not our research actually. This was I should have actually, I think I missed providing the reference. It was a study led by IIT Madras by Dr. Gunthe, and this work published in Nature kind of told us how important chloride was to the kind of lack in visibility that we see in Delhi smog. So a lot of water uptake due to a lot of chloride, reduces our visibility to incredibly low levels, and that's one of the main reasons that we have this huge haze and fog and poor visibility. So high chloride, the question now arises, where is it coming from? So this is where we started putting our efforts, primarily here and from chemical engineering, Professor Vikram. We kind of decided to look much more in detail into our species data, not the source apportionment, because in source apportionment, if you go back and see, we are clearly getting a source which we are calling as the chloride source. Okay, so it is just chloride. There's nothing else in it, and it is unaffected by the fact that there's a lockdown. Okay, so we observed that it's not affected by the lockdown. We also observed that the high concentrations of chloride are primarily coming from the northwest. Primarily coming from the northwest, although we have contributions from all different directions, but the high concentrations are primarily coming from the northwest. So thermodynamics tells us that the chloride amount of particulate chloride as compared to the gas phase chloride has to depend on RH and temperature. We said that let's take another parameter, which is the percentage of wind that we are getting from the northwest in any given time. Okay. So it turns out that we can predict very closely the amount of chloride that's observed at our location by just saying that it's a function of temperature, relative humidity, and the percentage wind from the northwest. Remember, there's no parameter like whether or not there was a lockdown. Okay, so lockdown does not affect it. That means it's an industry which is not affected by lockdown, a continuously running industry to the northwest, which is generating this chloride. So this is a paper that is an advanced stage of review, and happy to discuss any more details about it. So something that's deeply affecting our visibility is the chloride species, and it's probably coming from some concentrated industrial source in the northwest, not affected by lockdown restrictions or so. So I'll just stop here. I'll probably now take questions and see how much I could get across to the audience. And thank you again for having me speak at Sarkar.
Yeah, thank you, Mayank. Very nice presentation. So it's open to the question. Let me just see if people have typed the questions in the chat box.
Professor Dey, may I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Professor Mayank Kumar, excellent presentation.
Can you speak?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please, Mr. Dugal, we can hear you.
and a big question mark about chloride. I think more work needs to get done as to how and where it is coming from and how it can be controlled. But my basic question is that I've been reading about PM1, that is probably far more damaging to human health than PM 2.5 or PM 10. But we haven't focused as much on PM1 as yet. At least I've not come across. I was wondering what your views are as we do further research. Should we give greater emphasis on tracking PM1 and researching as to what are the constituents and causes for PM1?
Thanks for that question. I agree with the broad point that the finer the particulate matter, the more chance it has to, or the more propensity to enter our breathing pathways and through into our lungs and to our bloodstream. So so actually this is kind of a arbitrary cutoff. Like where do you stop? And for example, earlier there was talk of PM10, but we said that this is mainly road dust. A lot of mass of PM10 is road dust. So let's focus on something smaller. By consensus, some kind of not exactly scientific, but some kind of broad agreement. People said that okay, let's look at PM 2.5, but PM1 is definitely finer, and so PM 2.5 also enters our lungs and pathways, but one is finer. And even fine, we could think of even fine particles. For example, particles that are of the order of nanometers, like 100, 200 nanometers. Some of those particles can also be very, very dangerous, and they are in huge numbers compared to something like 1 micron. So I think focus on especially these smaller particles and what are those compositions can be very helpful. And also we need to have probably medical evidence. So I think the evidence that's there right now, probably Professor Sagri can comment more on this, but I think the medical evidence that we have right now, it's correlated with PM 2.5. So I think I don't know if there are, but probably there are, but there need to be more size segregated studies on the effect on human health of these different range of this spectrum of particles plus composition. So different composition and different particle ranges, how does that affect us? So I think definitely focusing on smaller particulates, but PM 2.5 at this point is also, I think, somewhere that a lot of people have agreed that it's finer than PM 10, and it's definitely something that's injectable, goes inside our pathways. So I think PM 2.5 is also a good point at this point, but we need finer studies definitely.
Thank you.
So there is a question asked by Mr. Bir Kumar. Was there any study on nanoparticle concentrations during Diwali and stubble burning? Nanoparticles can travel long distances due to their very small size and tendency not to settle down easily.
I think that's again a good question, and I think it builds up on the point that Mr. Duggal raised. So we have number concentrations during Diwali, and these. The question, I think, what the questioner is asking is, the fireworks, when they're emitted under, at what size range are they emitted? Are these the concentrations that we are seeing of fireworks, especially these elements, which increase 300, 400 times? I think on a slide I had some of these values which said that they are, higher than, some of the industrial air guidelines or industrial air numbers for critical concentrations. For example, barium and all, they're much higher than not just resident air guidelines for industrial air. So what size are these emissions? How much of these are in the nanometer range? How much of these are in the 1 micron range? So there's definite increase in the number concentration of small particles, and this is the data that we need to analyze and be able to see where these numbers lie. Actually, so there's a more advanced instrument called as the aerosol mass spectrometer, which actually gives us the size resolved data of, by size, by the different size ranges, what is the composition. So it's actually a lot of data to process, but it is that kind of data we actually need to answer that question. Also, we can do this study on simple cascade impactor based filter papers where we can see the composition of finer and finer particles. Unfortunately, what we have done here, it does not really give us what is the size resolved composition, the kind of question that's being asked. So I think we need more data to precisely be able to answer the question. But great question.
Any other question by anyone? There you unmute yourself and ask, or raise your hand or type in. Yeah, please go ahead. You are muted. Please unmute yourself.
I think Jayaprakash is, I think someone else is asking.
Someone else.
Okay.
Can you please mute yourself? Unmute yourself.
Are you here?
Yes.
Hi, Professor Main.
Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Okay, so Jayaprakash. Okay, so I think now let Jayaprakash. I will come back to you.
Okay. Okay.
Please,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, no,
Can I ask?
I am asking. I'm not sure what is the name. VIAYR. You
Okay.
want to ask a question, and then I will come back to you, Jayaprakash.
I think we have connectivity problems.
Okay, maybe there's a connectivity issue.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah. Now we can hear. Please ask your question.
Okay. So, firstly, thank you very much for allowing me to ask this question. I'm attending this for the first time, and can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but there is some sort of echo.
Okay. So, just a moment. So, is it okay now?
Yeah, you can just give us your question so that we can hear what's your question, and then we can ask you clarifications if we cannot hear you. So just shoot your question.
So my question is that I have a background working on the air pollution area. I'm from the corporate, right? And I work for an American company in the field of artificial intelligence. My view is that one of the major problems is absolutely measuring the quality of the air, and all the statistics which you have shown is there definitely in our domain, and we have done a lot of work in this space. My only point of worry is that are there any solutions which are there could be not remedial but at the prevention level and put at level using technology? That is my main question. And if there are, I'm not worried about air purifiers, I'm looking at prevention and control. What are the solutions which you think you should have? I mean, this question could be a little more loaded one. I would be happy to hear, Professor.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So definitely, once the pollutant is out in the environment, I don't think anyone can do much except you could have these small scale purifiers or the large scale ones at very localized positions. Let's say at a traffic intersection, just like we have these Vayu purifiers in the NCR region. So you can probably while you're stuck at that intersection, probably the air can be a bit cleaner and it can help you a bit. But once the hard or the disappointing fact is that once the pollutant is out there, it's emitted. There's nothing anyone can do because it's a very costly exercise to have that much number of smog towers. It's just insanely expensive. Probably it equals the GDP of the biggest countries in the world to have even a city or a region like Delhi NCR covered with these smog towers. So I think you have to do control at the source, and I think any expert will agree with me, and I think experts are of this opinion almost across the board that we need to control at the source. So for example, the Bharat 6 vehicles and the Bharat 6 fuel, that's a great step. With the old vehicles, if we can have a technology that can capture, especially in old diesel vehicles, if we can capture the particulate matter emissions, I think that's a great technology to work on. And a lot of these industries, if the regulations are kind of enforced in a of course, it requires a lot of manpower, and a lot of the pollution control bodies are probably in a country like India, you need really a lot of manpower to be able to, and a lot of resources to be able to control and curb. But if you can curb a lot of these local industries. Curb in the sense not stop them, but help them with the pollution control measures that we discussed. Then that will also, I think, go a long way. So basically, curbing emissions at the source of at this primary emission location. Now, I want to discuss this in particular our chloride work. So definitely, at some point, a lot of people are focused on this, and the source of chloride, which industry it is, it will be found. It's just a matter of time. So, for example, if someone has, if the work is done that chloride is contributing in an disproportionate way to the visibility and to the smog in Delhi, locating those industries and maybe helping them. I don't want to use the term force, but helping them to follow the strict emission norms. It will definitely go a long way. So just identifying the top polluters and making sure they follow this, the emission norms can go a long way, because things like once it's out in the air, just capturing all the air pollution is impossible, as everyone understands already. Yeah.
Thank you. I understand that part very well. My question was more interested about technology innovation and this platform. Have you done any technology innovation to really mitigate air? Source level is fine. Technology innovation.
No, so our work at this point, like the group that I am part of, this Grand Challenge project, we are not really there have been some isolated efforts that we have started, but we specifically have not, as of yet, there's nothing which is mature enough for pollution control. But there are other people at IIT and across the board who are working on these technologies. Especially, I see a lot of effort on capturing emissions from diesel gensets and other combustion sources. So I think that's the way to go, especially the older diesel vehicles.
So thank you very much. I will be happy to contribute in the area of technology. Tomorrow I'm chairing a session AI pollution conference.
We can follow it up. Thank you. Thank you.
If they want to attend, they can get in touch with me.
Sure. Please type all the details. Yeah, Jaiprakash, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello. Thanks, Professor Sabri. And Mr. Mayank, can you go to the last slide where you've shown that trajectory plot? There I think you're one of the paper in review. Go down. No, sir. Last two slides. Yeah, this one. Next.
Yeah.
Slide 28.
Slide 28. Okay.
Yeah. So here you mentioned that that northwest. So how much data set you have that for that northwest direction?
So
you taken the whole data set or just for that post monsoon or?
Okay, so on the x-axis you see that the data is from February 2020 to April. So there's at least more than a year of data that we are looking at for this, and we have now much more data. So we are definitely not looking at a small chunk of data. It's at least a year-long data that we're talking about.
So I think that will be. Have you segregated in the season, because that we can get that clearer, because northwest direction will be shifted in the different direction. Means not like your percentage of share in the northwest direction mainly coming from the timing of post monsoon. Maybe.
Can you please repeat? Sorry, I didn't get you.
Your equation is shown here, the northwest direction.
Yes.
There you will mention here the percentage, right?
Yes.
Or percentage. Yes. So I'm saying about that is you taking the whole data set on behalf of, you can take in the separate season, or you can show that separate season means how much percentage of northwest direction in summer, how much northwest direction in that monsoon, and percentage share. So that can give the better idea of what are the chloride derived from. Means northwest mainly comes the percentage of share would be come from the like.
I think I think I have understood your question, and maybe let me respond, and then maybe you can ask a follow-up question if I'm not clear enough. So this this regression equation is taking the percentage of wind coming from the northwest as one of the parameters. Now for the seasons such as the post monsoon season or the winter, this number will be a large number. So again, the effect on the chloride concentration will increase. But in the summers where this number will be relatively low, so this term will have a lower impact on the so across the year, this term gives us, what's the effect of the percentage of wind that's coming from northwest on the chloride, the observed chloride concentrations. But we can do the analysis season by season as well, in which case we will see that.
Yeah, it will give that clear representation of that mainly derived where is coming from and what are the sources.
Yeah, we can discuss more about this offline. Actually, this is something that's a continuing work, and but
And I have one question more. I think Duggal sir said that about that PM1. So in ACSM, have you that cutoff means cyclone of PM1?
oh, we have PM 2.5.
Not you have that PM1. I think they manufacturers can get that PM1 also.
Yeah, they can give. In fact, before our equipment, most of the ACSMs. I mean, the trend was generally that the ACSMs around the world were PM1 ACSMs, but
Yeah,
because
because in that Dr. Ghazala Habib group, they having that ACSM and
they have PM1. Yeah, so most of
yeah,
the ACSMs.
and they are using DC also for the PM1. So that gives that clear picture of the total composition of PM.
Yeah, so we are also measuring. So the problem with doing PM1 is that for example, some of the equipments they are mostly designed to work with PM 2.5. So you can have a PM1 cyclone on top of most instruments, but typically, for example, the black carbon monitor, it comes with a PM 2.5 inlet. Of course, you can modify it, and then similarly the metals monitor that we have used, it also typically comes with a PM 2.5 inlet. So we thought it makes sense to do if you want to do so.
All means you have that I think exact also.
Yeah, exact.
So
So
they can also provide that PM1.
yeah, so we can change the inlet.
Because why I'm concerning about, because Duggal has said that PM1 because we initiated means Dr. Ghazala Habib Group and Professor Karan Gupta already done that PM1 and source of phosphate in 2017 and it is my paper, you can see that, and there we focus on the chloride where it's coming from this. So
Yeah.
I think means now you people can go ahead for the PM1.
Yeah. Okay, I think probably can take the discussion offline in the interest of time. So we'll take the last two questions which are already posted. So Mayank, one question is from Amit Punjal on the contribution of exhaust versus non-exhaust emissions from the vehicular sector. And he's saying that his study is suggesting that 80% of the vehicular contribution is actually non-exhaust. So do you see similar kind of thing in your data also?
Okay, so so the brake or tire wear emissions from the automobile sector is, I think, is what is being talked about here. So actually something that is, if we are looking at it from the point of these statistical methods like PMF, so something that is emitted by a certain source will generally line up with each other. So if we are measuring the elemental markers of brake and tire wear, at the same time if we are measuring the organic markers of tailpipe emissions, they'll probably gather or they'll probably couple with each other and should come as a single source when we sample because they are they are co-emitted by the vehicle as it trudges along. But it's if you look at just the elemental emissions, probably one might tilt in favor of the non tailpipe emissions, the non exhaust emissions. But I think if we take into account the organic emissions, the organic particulate matter emissions with something like the ACSM or AMS, I don't think honestly you can ignore the exhaust emissions from the tailpipe. especially if you're not ignoring the organic emissions. So I don't think that is our influence, but probably remains to be seen. We have not really splitted the automobile source into non-exhaust and exhaust source, but I totally agree that it's a very valuable exercise to do to find out what's the breakup. So we can look into it, as I'm sure other people are also.
Okay. Okay, so last question from Ekta is that, she wants to know your comments on how we can reduce personal exposure to these harmful elements and pollutants that you just mentioned here, particularly during Diwali and stubble burning this peak period.
I think that's probably I'm not the best person to say how to. If you ask me, I like. I like Diwali, and we have been, as growing up, we were very fond of this. But I've seen that as I've grown up, I kind of stay indoors while all the firecracker activities going on. So I don't know, if you want to stay safe, maybe stay inside, turn on the air purifier. But it's a good question how to reduce personal exposure. I can just say what I do, but probably subjective question there.
Okay, so there's a question, I think interesting question. This is on the more localized sources within Delhi, particularly not clean cooking. Is it an important source in Delhi?
I think it's a very important source in Delhi. So let me, I don't know if my slides are still visible. This is something that we saw during the lockdown, that, a lot of different sources kind of went down, but there was one particular source, and we have the signature of it. We calling it the combustible factor 1. And we saw that after the lockdown, this kind of increased, and everything else went down. We know the total PM 2.5 went down, but some burning source is definitely a combustion source, which we are seeing is going up. What it could be, I think it's definitely, people could not go out. A lot of people, who are on the job, once you're out of the job, whether you are rich or not so rich, you kind of go out and eat somewhere outside. If a lot of people are forced to stay indoors, they probably are doing some domestic cooking where they don't have the cleanest source. So our guess was that this is some local cooking. There's emissions from some local cooking source which increased just after the lockdown. So the short answer, then you can see the concentration, it's 15-20 microgram per meter cube. So the short answer is, I do think that these sources, these local sources, these local combustion sources are very important to the concentrations in Delhi. It cannot be ignored.
Okay. Okay, I think thanks. And we're running out of time, so let us end today's session here. So it's my privilege to now propose the vote of thanks. First, I want to thank Mr. Arun Duggal, who is always there supporting us with his vision and passion for various activities. I also want to thank Mr. Hemant Kaushal and the entire Sarka staff for arranging this seminar today. All the participants who are patiently listening, attending our Sarka lecture series month after month, making it a big success. And finally, a big thank to today's speaker, Professor Mayank Kumar, who kindly agreed to talk about this very important topic at the right time, because we are currently going through this peak pollution season. Stubble burning is there, but this time, fortunately, initial report suggests that it's quite low. However, the Diwali is coming, so your work definitely will shed some important insights into the problem, and we look forward, Mayank, the results of this year's Diwali. So
Thanks, definitely. Thanks.
we can definitely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.